Welcome to Excel Campus. My name is John, and today we're diving into a beginner's tutorial for Excel. Now, whether you're just starting with Excel or refreshing your skills, this video is going to have everything you need. I've been teaching Excel for over 15 years, and I'm excited to share essential tips, best practices, and also some common mistakes to avoid. We'll start with the very basics, so feel free to skip ahead to more advanced sections. And you can download the Excel file I'm using to follow along. So let's get started. Here's a list of topics we're going to cover, and by the end of the video, you will know how to navigate Excel, input and format data, write formulas, and do some basic data analysis. Okay, so we're first going to start by opening Excel, and there are a few different ways to use Excel. The most common way is the desktop app, and I am on Windows, so right here within my taskbar, I have the Excel application. Or you might be going to the Start menu to find Excel, but I'll just click this, and this will open Excel, which is the desktop application on Windows. Now there's also a desktop application on Mac. I'm going to be using the Windows version throughout this video, but I'll make notes of keyboard shortcuts and things like that that might be different on the Mac version. Once Excel opens, you'll be greeted with this start screen here. And from here, you can just start with a blank workbook. You can choose from some templates. And as you scroll down here, we have some recommended files and recent files that we've opened in the past. So for now, we can just start with a blank workbook, and we'll go ahead and click this button. And that will again open a new blank workbook with a blank worksheet. Now, another popular way to use Excel is with the web version. In your web browser, you can type in excel.new and hit enter, and that will first prompt you to log in. Once you log in, and you can do that with a free account, Excel will open up in the web. And this version of Excel looks very similar to the desktop version of Excel. If you're using Excel on Teams or SharePoint, you might also be opening Excel in the web version. And again, I'm going to be using the desktop version of Excel, but I will make notes where there's a difference between the desktop version and the web version as well. So the first thing you'll typically want to do when creating a new file is save it. And we can do that by going to the File menu here, and we can choose Save As. And here, Excel is going to prompt us to possibly save it on OneDrive or SharePoint or one of our OneDrive personal sites, depending on your setup. If you don't want to do any of those, you can also hit the Browse here, and then that will open up this Browse window, and you can find a folder on your computer where you want to save the file. I'm going to go ahead and just save this one to the desktop. Here we can rename it, so I'll just call this training, and you hit enter, and that will go ahead and save the file to the desktop, and then you can see the new file name right here. And then each time you make changes to the file and you want to save that, you can press the Save button right here, or you can use Control S. Now, one thing to note here is if you do save the file to SharePoint or OneDrive, Excel has an auto-save feature, and that will be turned on, and then you don't have to remember to save. So if you do have a OneDrive or SharePoint account, it's nice to save files there because you won't lose data if you forget to save it. Next, we'll take a look at opening files. And to do that, again, we're going to go to the File menu and click Open. Keyboard shortcut is Control-O to get to this menu. Here, again, we'll see our OneDrive and SharePoint locations. If we want to find a file on our computer, we can click Browse to open up the Browse window. I actually saw the file that I want right over here in the Recents, which is this one here, so I'm going to go ahead and click it. Now this file I'm using, I'll make available for free download, and I'll put a link in the description below where you can download it and follow along. Or you can follow along with a blank new workbook, but I do highly encourage you to follow along and practice. It will help you learn a lot faster. And the first thing we're going to talk about is navigating Excel. So for a lot of people, when they see Excel for the first time, it kind of looks like this. This is a picture of a cockpit of a jet. And unless you're a commercially trained pilot, this is going to look very overwhelming and confusing to you, especially if your task is to land the plane. And this is how Excel can look. If it looks like that to you, don't worry. We're going to take it slow and kind of go through the application here, and you'll learn as you go. So don't let it overwhelm you. But what I've done to help with this is create some application guides. And I have one for Windows, Mac, and the web version here within this folder. And so this just shows a quick overview of the different components here in the application window and the names of those components or elements. And you don't have to memorize all these, but it can be very helpful if you're communicating with your boss or coworkers and trying to navigate around Excel to know the names of some of these components. The most popular one is going to be the ribbon tabs up here at the top, and the ribbon contains all the buttons, or this is sometimes called the toolbar, that contains all the buttons that we interact with. And of course we have the grid or the worksheet down below where we input data and write formulas and create charts and things like that, which we're going to talk about in this video. Okay, so down here at the bottom of the application window, we have all of the worksheet tabs. And you can use these buttons over here to scroll to the right or left to see more tabs. I'm going to go to this one, Workbook versus Worksheet. And I want to explain the difference between these two terms because they're often used kind of interchangeably, and they do mean two different things. Workbook is essentially the Excel file that contains a collection of worksheets, which we can see down here. So we're looking at this one Excel workbook or this Excel file, and it has a lot of sheets in it. And then of course the worksheet is the sheet down here at the bottom. These are typically referred to as sheets or tabs. And of course we can click on these, and each of these tabs contains data and formulas and all kinds of information here in the grid. And before we get to data types, I want to talk about the grid. To do that, we're going to insert a new sheet. And to insert a new sheet, we can just click this plus button right here. That's going to insert a new blank sheet. When Excel does that, it will name it sheet and then have a number at the end. And one really good practice to get into is renaming your sheets. Otherwise, you're going to have a workbook full of sheets that just are named like this. They're not very descriptive, and it'll be hard to find your data. So to rename a sheet, we just double click the sheet name here, and that'll put this in edit mode. And I'm going to call this one favorites list. We're going to create a list of favorites. The sheet names can have spaces in them. That's totally fine. We'll go ahead and hit enter, and that will rename the sheet. So I just wanted to take a quick time out and say that our goal here at Excel Campus is to help you elevate your Excel skills so you can save time with your job and advance in your career. To help you on this journey, we've put together this free Excel starter pack that includes some helpful guides to help you remember all this stuff and use Excel like a pro. I'll put a link in the description where you can grab it for free. So this area up here is called the grid, and this is where you're going to be spending most of your time in Excel. So the grid is made up of rows, and we can see the row numbers here on the left side, and columns across the top, and these are column letters. And these square boxes here, or these boxes here, they're rectangles, are cells. These are referred to as cells. And each cell has an address. In this case here, this is cell C2 because it's in C3 because it's in column C, row 3. So this is cell C3. And we can also see that when we have that cell selected right here in the name box, this is the cell that we currently have selected. Now, of course, we can also select multiple cells by left click and holding and then dragging the mouse to select multiple cells. When we do that, this is called a range. So a selection of multiple cells is referred to as a range. So now let's input some data. I'm going to select cell B2. And I'm first going to type the word name. And with the cell selected, you can just start typing on the cell, and it's going to essentially edit the cell and put the value in the cell. And then when you hit enter, that will input the value and then select the next cell. So here we just might want to create a list of names. Again, I'll just type some out here, and each time I'm just going to hit enter to do that. And as I'm going down this list or creating a list, you'll notice here the next name that I want to type is Emily. And when I put the capital E in here, you can see that Excel auto-completes this for me. It's saying that if you want to use Erica, all you have to do right now is hit enter. And that's because it's pretty smart. It's read all of the names here, or this list above, and anytime I start a word with that same letter or series of letters, it's going to help us and auto-complete the word if we want that. If we don't want that, I can just continue to type here. So I'm just going to type Emily and hit enter. Same thing here. If I wanted to do David, I would see Diego, but I don't want that. I'll just override that and hit enter, and I can keep going. So it's a nice little shortcut there with autocomplete to save you some time. And now we're going to add another column with everyone's favorite number. So I'm going to type favorite number here in the header to name that column. And here, when we're inputting numbers, it's the same as inputting text. You can do that from either if your keyboard has a 10 key on the right side, you can do that from the number pad, or you can do it with the numbers at the top of the keyboard. So I'm just gonna input some numbers here. It's the same thing. I can just type in numbers and hit enter, and that will allow me to do data entry. Now, if someone changes their mind and they want a different number instead, to edit data in Excel, one thing we can do, or maybe we made an invalid entry here, is we can just type over this number. So if I select this cell now, and let's say this was supposed to be 47 instead, I can just type over that number. That's going to override the 75 that was there, and when I hit enter, that will make the change. Now, if we don't want this number here, maybe Erica's undecided on her favorite number, we can hit the delete key on the keyboard, and that's gonna clear out contents or the value of the cell. Now, if you accidentally make a change that you want to revert back, you of course can undo. There's an undo button right here in the quick access toolbar. The keyboard shortcut is Control-Z, or you can hit this little drop down arrow and it will show you a list of all of your recent changes, and you can revert back to any of those to go back in time. I'm just gonna undo the last change, so I'll just hit the undo button once. Now we can see our number is back. And one other quick tip for data entry here is, let's say you accidentally type something in a cell or accidentally hit a key on your keyboard and you didn't want to make this change. Right now I'm editing the cell, and as long as I hit the escape key right now, I'll just hit escape, that's gonna escape out of that change and revert back to the previous value. All right, so one thing that's bugging me about this spreadsheet is that this favorite number, this text here, is bleeding over into the next column. There's several ways to fix this. First of all, we can just go up here and put the mouse between the column headers, and when we left click and hold this icon here, we can then drag the column to the right or left to resize it. So I can just resize it to fit the word favorite number in the column. Now you might have to kind of move back and forth here to figure out exactly where it fits so it doesn't bleed over. But one trick to this is, if it is narrow like this, is you can just double click right here, and that's going to auto fit to the widest text or the widest value in the entire column. And you can also do this with multiple columns selected. So let's again say that this was narrower, and we also want to make the name column a little narrower. We can first hover over here, left click and hold to select both columns. And then on either of these columns, we can just move over to the right, double click right here, and that's gonna auto fit both columns. Now, if you have a sheet with a lot of columns on it, let's say dozens or hundreds of columns, you can also select right here to select all the columns, all the rows and columns on the sheet. And then again, just double click in any one of these, and that's gonna auto fit all of the columns on the sheet. And these same techniques work with rows as well. If you want to make rows taller or shorter, you can do the same thing there, and then again, double click to auto fit the rows. Okay, so before we format this sheet, we're gonna go over to the Data Types tab, and I wanna talk about data types, because this is an important concept in Excel. And what I mean by data types is each cell can contain a specific type of value, which is a data type. And they're listed right here. At least these are probably the 4 most popular. There are other ones, but you don't need to be too concerned with those right now. So of course, in a cell, we can type a number. I'm just gonna type the number 100 right here and hit enter. When I do that, Excel is automatically going to align this number to the right. And that kind of lets us know that this is a number in a cell. And of course, we can do math on numbers or write formulas against numbers, which we're going to talk about later in the video. Now, of course, a cell can also contain text. So if we just type the word hello in here and hit enter, the text is going to automatically be left aligned. And that's a good way to differentiate text between numbers, because sometimes text will look like numbers. Or in this case here, if we wanted to edit this, and one way we can do that is we just double click into this cell. Maybe I want to add a 4 at the end, space 4, and now hit enter. When I do that, this is still considered text. Even though this value contains a number, Excel looks at this as text. And that's important because we could not add 100 to hello 4 to get a result. We can't add these two numbers together or do any type of math here to get a result. They would both have to be numbers. So that's text. Dates are also very important in Excel. I'm just gonna go ahead and input a date here. You can do that with slashes or dashes and hit enter, and Excel will convert that to a date. We'll talk about dates in a little bit because they have some nuances here that are really important to understand, but essentially it's good to know that a cell can also contain a date. Now the last one is one that you don't really have to worry about too much right now when you're starting out with Excel. But if you ever type the word true or the word false in a cell and hit enter, you'll see that it automatically capitalizes it and center aligns it. And that's because this is considered a Boolean value or a logical value. And Excel can use these to make decisions based on conditions. And that's something we'd look at in a future video. I have videos on the if formula and things like that you can check out if you want to learn more about Boolean values. But again, as you're starting out, don't get too worried about this right now. I just wanted to show it in case you ever type a true or a false in a cell and you're wondering why it looks like that and why you can't format it to look something like this. Okay, so next we're going to jump over to the number formatting tab. And here I'm just going to input a number and we'll make this a decimal number. So I'll say 123.5. And when I hit enter there, that's just going to show me the decimal. Now, anytime you input a number into a cell, it's automatically going to have what's called the general formatting. And up here on the home tab in the number format dropdown, which is this right here, you can see that we have general, which is no specific format. So by default, all cells just contain this general format, which is no specific formatting. But we can change that, as you can see here. So let's do that on this next line here. I'll just go ahead and input the same number, and then we'll select this cell. And from here, we can do a currency format. So we can just change that to a currency format. That adds the currency. In my case, I'm in the US, so this is a dollar symbol. It also adds the comma here and the decimal place if there is not a decimal place. And what I mean by that is we just had a value like this, 1500. Again, this is a general format. But if we were to change this to the accounting format now, which is another popular format, again, that's going to add decimal places there. It puts the currency symbol out to the left and aligns this a little differently. This is used commonly for financial reports. When you have negative numbers, all the numbers are aligned nicely. So that's the accounting style format. If you didn't want to show the decimals here, again, up on the home tab, we have some buttons to increase and decrease the decimal. So I can just click this twice and that will get rid of my decimal places and also the period there. So it just shows the whole number. And then with percentages, there's actually two ways to enter percentages. First of all, we can input a decimal number. So I'm going to type 0.15. And with this decimal number, I can select this cell. And here on the number format dropdown, I can change this to a percentage format. When I do that, we get the decimal places here. Of course, if you didn't want the decimal places, you could just decrease the decimals to remove those. With this, you can also just input 15%. I'm going to just type 15 and then use the percentage symbol here, which on the US keyboard is Shift 5, hit enter, and that will automatically apply the percentage format when we input that. We can see it right here in the number dropdown that we've applied the percentage format. So that's a saves one step. So next we're going to jump over to the Dates tab and talk about dates. Dates are probably one of the most misunderstood features of Excel. And I want to give you a quick crash course on dates to help prevent some future frustration when you're working with dates in Excel. So right here in this cell, I'm just going to type a 1 and hit enter. Just the number 1 in this cell. And I'm going to go up to the home tab, again, number format dropdown, and I'm going to change this to a short date format. When I do that, you can see that this now has a date of January 1st, 1900. So what is this date? Well, essentially the calendar in Excel starts on this date, January 1st, 1900. As far as Excel is concerned, there's no dates before January 1st, 1900. And so what this really means is that each whole number represents one day in Excel. And in order to explain that, we're going to input today's date right here. And there's a keyboard shortcut for that, which is Control semicolon. So if you hold the Control key and press semicolon, that's going to insert today's date. You can go ahead and hit enter to input the date. Now this, and that also works on Mac too. Control semicolon works on the Mac version of Excel. Now this date right here, if we take this date and we go back up to the home tab and change this to a general format, that's going to convert it to this number here, which 45,463. So this is the number of days that have elapsed since January 1st, 1900. And my point here is that, like I said before, days are just whole numbers. So we're actually, and dates are whole numbers as well. And what we're really doing in Excel is we're taking this number and applying a mask or a formatting to it for a date. And you can do a short date, a long date, and then you can also go here to more number formats. And if you go to date, there's a lot of different date formats you can choose from right here. Another way to get to this menu is you can right click anywhere here and choose Format Cells. Keyboard shortcut is Control-1 to open this menu. And so if you want to get a very specific date or even customize your own date formatting, you can absolutely do that and hit OK, and that will change the formatting. And while we're on the topic of dates, cells can also hold times or contain times. Keyboard shortcut to input the current time is Control-Shift semicolon. Control-Shift semicolon will do that, and then you can just hit Enter. On the Mac, it's Command semicolon. And then if you want to do the date and the time, I'm going to use Control semicolon. I'm going to type a space, and then since I'm on Windows, it'll be Control-Shift semicolon. Again, if you're on the Mac, Command semicolon there, hit Enter, and that will input the date and time into the cell. And one really quick note here, since dates are whole days, if we were to change this back to a general format or a number format, you can see that we now have a decimal because 1:01 p.m. is about halfway through the day, or 0.54 through one whole day. And since dates are whole numbers and fractions, this makes it very easy to do calculations on dates, which we'll take a look at later in the video. Next, we're going to jump back over to our favorites list and do some formatting. So the first thing I'm going to do here is select our header row so we can format this. And then up here on the Home tab, you can see that we have a lot of different buttons and options for formatting. The first thing I want to do is apply a fill color. So we can go here and choose any of these fill colors. I'm going to choose this light green color. And then I also want to bold this text. So I'll hit the bold button, or you can use Control-B on the keyboard. The other thing I'm going to do is select all of the data here, and I'm going to apply some borders. So on this drop down right here, we have all types of different border options. I'm just going to use all borders to apply all of those borders, but there's several options you can do here, including changing the colors of the border as well. And then there's also several other options up here for alignment and a lot of different features to apply formatting. I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but I do encourage you to explore the ribbon up here to see what each of these do. Next up, we're going to take a look at one of the most common tasks you'll probably do in your Excel journey, which is copy and paste. So I'm going to jump over here to the Office Favorites sheet. And on this sheet, I have another list of favorites. I have names here, favorite number, and favorite color. And I want to copy this information to the bottom of my favorites list. And I actually only want to copy these first two columns, the name and favorite number. So I'm going to select that range. And then you can either right-click copy or hit Control-C on the keyboard. When you do that, you'll notice that the highlighted range starts to move here. This is sometimes called marching ants. And essentially this is telling us that we've copied this range. It just lets us know that this range has currently been copied to the clipboard. And now we can go over to our favorites list here and paste. And of course you can hit Control-V here, or you can also right-click and choose Paste. Now when you do that, you'll see that we also get the colors and the formatting from our original copy, and we might not want that. And fortunately with Excel, we have a lot of different options for paste. After you do the paste, you can see those options in this menu right here. You can click on this and you'll see all of these different paste options. Probably one of the most common ones you'll use is paste values, this option right here. Current keyboard shortcut for that is Control-Shift-V on modern versions of Excel. So when we click that, that's just going to paste the values only and not paste any of the formatting. There are a lot of other paste options here, which I'm not going to cover in this video, but I encourage you to explore these. And I do have a separate video on this topic. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Now, since we only pasted values here, we might want to copy our borders and some of our additional formatting from above down below here. And in order to do that, what we can do is just select one of these cells or ranges that contains the formatting we want to copy. And up here on the Home tab, there's a really nice feature called Format Painter. We can click on this and that's going to enable the Format Painter. Again, you'll see the marching ants here to let us know that we've copied this range. And then we can just left click and hold and select all of the cells that we want to apply that formatting to. And once we do that, that will apply the formatting and the borders. And then finally, of course, we also want to auto fit this. So I'm just going to double click right here so we can now see the full name. Next, we'll talk about moving cells. So we can select any cell or range, and when we hover over the border, the mouse is going to turn into these crosshairs. We can left click and hold here and actually move the cell, and that'll move the entire contents of the cell, including the formatting. We'll see the formatting is removed from here. So essentially this is like a cut and paste. Now I want to move that back because I don't want to mess up my nice table here. And with moving, we can also move and insert at the same time. What I mean by that is, let's say Michael Scott wants to be at the top row. If you've seen the popular TV show The Office, Michael Scott is the boss, and we might want to move him up to the top row of our table. So I'm going to select both cells here. Again, hover the border. And now when I move up, I'm going to hold the Shift key on the keyboard. And you'll see that the line there turns into that horizontal line. And this is letting me know that the information is going to be put in between, or the cells are going to be put in between these two rows. So essentially when I release the left mouse button here, that's going to move Michael Scott up to the top and move all of the other rows down. And that same technique also works for columns. Now, if we wanted to insert or delete columns, we can do that by first selecting a column, and we'll right click right here, and we can choose insert. This is going to insert a column to the left, and we now have a new column here. If we wanted to delete that, we can just go here and delete. But I want to insert, so I'm going to insert a column here. And I want to do some numbering. I want to number these rows. So the first thing I'm going to do is just type a 1 here in this cell, and then I'm going to type a 2. And instead of going all the way down, typing those numbers sequentially, I'm going to select these two cells where I've started my sequence, and then I'm going to hover over the bottom right corner of the cell. This until you see this plus symbol. This is called the fill handle. And the fill handle does a lot of things, but essentially it allows us to copy down. And when we do that, it's also going to create a sequence. You can see the number 14 there at the bottom. When I release the left mouse button, that's going to fill all the way down. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. And you can also double click here to do the same thing. So again, fill handle, double left click, and that will automatically fill down the series. Now, like I said, there's a lot of options here, and you can see those autofill options right here. You could copy the cells instead, just copy the formatting. A lot of different options depending on the type of data you have in the cell, but this is a very handy feature that will save you a lot of time. Next up, we're going to write some formulas. Before we do that, I'm just going to give some favorite numbers here for Emily and David, and then we have a full column of numbers. And let's say we want to sum up all of these numbers. We can go to the cell down here below the table, and we're going to write a formula. So to write a formula in Excel, we'll always start it with the equal sign. So we're just going to type the equal sign here in the cell, and I'm going to use a function here. So Excel has a whole library of functions that just make our lives a lot easier when we're trying to do calculations in Excel. For this one, I'm just going to start typing the word sum. And as I do that, you can see as I start typing, I'm getting a list here of all of the different functions that start with SU. In this case, we want sum, so we'll start complete sum. Sum's going to add all of the numbers in a range of cells. And this is what we want to do. Right now, I'm going to hit the Tab key. That will open up here, inputting the parentheses to open up the function. And this shows the function arguments here in the screen tip. So it's just asking for a number or a range of numbers. So for this formula, I can just select all of the cells that I want to sum up right here from D3 to D16. By just selecting those, Excel will create this reference. This is called a range reference to all of the cells. And that's all we need for this formula. So we can just go ahead and hit enter, and that will do the calculation for us. And maybe the sum really isn't useful in this case with favorite numbers, but the average might be. So again, we can type equals here, start typing average, and we can see we have a lot of different average functions, but we're just going to use the basic average function to return the average of its arguments. We'll hit the tab key again to tab into that. Again, the arguments here for average are the numbers, so we'll just select this range of numbers, D3 to D16, go ahead and hit enter, and then that will give us the average of the favorite numbers. And Excel actually has a feature built in that will write these formulas for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these formulas, just hit the delete key there. And on the Home tab up here, there is an Auto Sum button. It's this button right here. So I first have the cell selected below the table here, and I'm just going to click this button, and that will write the formula for me. Excel recognizes the range of numbers here up above, and then writes the formula. All I need to do is hit enter, and it will write that formula. There's also options here if you hit the drop-down menu for average, count, max, and min. So you can use AutoSum to quickly write those formulas, and the keyboard shortcut for AutoSum is Alt equals. Hold the Alt key and then press the equals key. Now, when writing formulas, we don't have to use functions. We can also just use basic math. Let's say we wanted to add a number to each of our favorite numbers. So here I'm going to again type a formula. I started with equals, and then I'm going to select this cell, D3, and I'm going to type plus, and let's say we just want to add 10 to each of these numbers. So I'll just type a 10 here and hit enter, and that's going to, of course, give us the result of that math. And now again, I can use the fill handle here. I'll just double click it to fill the formula all the way down. And this formula is relative. And what that means is that for this cell here, when it's copied down, this formula is now going to reference the cell on the next row. So now this is D4 plus 10. And as we keep going down, that reference will change. And this is great, but we can also make this formula more efficient. And what I mean by that is instead of having the 10 in each cell, I'm going to put the 10 right up here in this cell. I'm just going to type 10 in this cell. And then for this formula, I'm just going to delete this one and we'll retype it. I'm going to say equals. Again, we'll select cell D3. And then I'm going to type plus and select the cell that contains the 10, which is F2. And I'll go ahead and hit enter now. Now, if I copy this formula down right now, both of those references are relative. So what I mean by that is if I copy this down, you can see that 10 is not added to 5 here. And that's because as I copied the formula down, this reference also moved down. It's called a relative reference. But we can anchor it down to this cell right here. And to do that, if we jump back into this formula, I'm gonna hit F2 on the keyboard to edit it, or you can double click into the cell to edit the formula. Right now, with our text cursor blinking out here at the end, we can hit F4 on the keyboard. If you're on the Mac, you'll hit Command T. And when we hit F4, that's going to put dollar symbols in front of the column letter and the row number. And this is called an absolute reference, which means it's anchored down to this cell F2. And as we copy the formula down or across, that reference will not change. So I'm going to hit enter now. And now I'm going to copy my formula down, and you can see that we're getting the correct results. And the advantage of doing it this way is that it's very easy to make changes to our variable. And when I say our variable, I mean this cell right here, this number. If instead of adding 10, we wanted to add 15, I can just type a 15 here and hit enter, and that's automatically going to recalculate all of these formulas, and they will all contain the correct result. So we don't have to go back into the formula and rechange this to 15 and then copy it back down and remember to take all those steps. This is a much more efficient way of writing formulas. And one important note with formulas, when you're looking at a cell that contains a formula, you will always see the result of the formula, but you can see the actual formula up here in the formula bar. So whenever you select a cell, just select a different cell here, we can see that formula right here. Same if we select this sum function down here, or formula with the sum function, we will see that formula up here. Now, when you go to edit the cell, and again, you can hit F2 on the keyboard to edit the cell. If you're on a laptop, you might have to hold the function key and press F2, or you can always just double click into the cell as well, and that will show you the formula in the cell. Once you hit escape or enter, then you will see the result. And of course, this only scratches the surface of writing formulas in Excel. This is a completely separate topic, which you'll spend a lot of time learning. And I'll put links to additional resources on formulas in the description below. So earlier in the video, I mentioned that calculations on dates are relatively easy. And now that we know how to write formulas, I want to jump back to the Dates tab here and explain how to do calculations on dates. So we're going to take today's date, and I'm actually going to change this formatting back to just the short date format so it's easier to see. And in this cell right here, I want you to put in your birthday. Now, if your birthday already happened this year, then you can put in your birthday for next year, because we're going to figure out how many days it's going to be until your next birthday. So I'm just going to make up a birthday for next year. I'll say it's 3/1/25, and I'll put that date right here, so March 1st. And in this cell right here, I'm just going to say equals. I'm going to select this cell, type a minus, and then select this cell. So we're just finding the difference between these two dates. And of course, that's going to return the number of days, because again, these dates, if we look at this in a general format or a number, these dates are just numbers. So we're really just subtracting two numbers to get the number of days. And if this number is 0, then I want to wish you a happy birthday. Next, we'll jump over to the filter sheet and talk about sorting and filtering. The first thing I'm going to do is select all of the data here. Then I'm going to go up to the Data tab and press the Filter button. Keyboard shortcut is Control-Shift-L. This is a toggle that will toggle the filter buttons on. You can see them right here at the top of the header in each column. And when we click on these, this is going to show us the sort and filter options for the column. Now, before we do this, we're going to start with sorting, but before we do this, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm just going to highlight this cell right here. I'm going to format it. I'll format it in a yellow color, just highlight that, or I'm sorry, that row. We're going to highlight that row. And then I'm also just going to put a word out here. I'm going to put bears because that's definitely Dwight's favorite animal. And we'll just put a word out here in this row. But as you can see, this word or this value is outside of the filter range because the filter range ends right here, kind of in this column. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to show what happens when we sort. So let's sort by attendance, and we'll say we want to sort largest to smallest. So I'll just click this here. This is going to put the largest values at the top. When I click that, that's going to instantly sort. And as you can see, all of the data in the row moves with that sort. So we now have Dwight at the top along with all of his data. However, bears does not move. This row or this cell out here did not move because it's outside of the filter range. So this is just important to know that when you're doing filtering and sorting, you want to make sure that you have all of these cells selected when you apply those filters. Excel is pretty good at just automatically detecting the range if you only have one cell selected here when you go turn filters on and off, but I encourage you to select everything just to make sure it works properly. And then of course, with these menus, we can also filter. So here we can hit the filter drop-down menu again. And if we just wanted to see everyone in the sales department, we can select that, hit OK, and that will filter down the rows for sales. It's not deleting those rows. As you can see over here, it's just hiding the rows that do not contain sales. And if we want to see those again, filter drop down, and we'll just clear the filter, and now we can see all rows. And finally, we're going to visualize our data by creating a chart. And for this chart, I want to chart the names and the number of coffee cups that each person has. So to do that, I'm going to first select this column right here. I'm then going to hold the Control key on the keyboard and select this column. This will allow me to select these non-adjacent columns or a range that's not adjacent. Once we have that, we're going to go up to the Insert tab, and here we're just going to choose a 2D column chart. We'll click that, and that will insert the chart on the sheet, and here we've now visualized the data. And of course, there's a lot more we could do with charts in Excel. I'll put a link in the description below to some additional resources on charts. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Excel takes time to learn, so don't be afraid to rewatch sections of the video. It will definitely get easier as you practice. And I'd love to know what's been most helpful for you so far. So please leave a comment below and let us know. Now, one of the most important Excel skills you can learn is formulas. In this video, we looked at sum and average, which are two of the most popular functions in Excel. The third most popular function is VLOOKUP, or the new version Xlookup. These are powerful functions that every Excel user should know, especially if you're gearing up for a job interview. So if you want to take the next step on your Excel journey, then check out this video next. Thanks again for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.